Here we are again, and I've been looking forward to make this video for a while. We've probably reached now the point where we can look at what a lot of people think are the best guns made in the world, and those are the guns made in the United Kingdom. Probably a lot of you have been to London. I think it's an amazing city to visit. There's the history and many of the best gun makers in the world. Some of you have commented that the British guns are overpriced. It's quite possible that they are, but they have a pedigree and have become, I guess, exclusive, or always were exclusive. And they're sort of instruments of commerce in a way. They don't seem to lose their value, although most guns don't seem to lose their value unless something goes wrong with them. Anyway, just a bit of an introduction. So we'll look at shotguns today, and I'll start as if the viewers know little or nothing. This is a boxlock. These are fairly modest British guns. You'll typically, if you're buying them used or new, you'll get a case. This is from Thomas Bland and Sons, Holland and Holland, Purdy, Wesley Richards. Any of those gun makers usually deliver the gun in a case. And I guess the concept is that in the case is everything you need for shooting. And I think the further concept is that you buy one shotgun and it serves you until either the hinge pin fails, which is sort of a contradiction. They're supposed to last a lifetime, but they do wear, and sometimes they need to be reproofed according to different laws, but that's another story. Anyway, so you get the gun in a case, and you have your chamber brush. This is a sterling silver grease container. There's a ratty looking pull through, and then brushes and so forth, everything that you would need. They had a number of formulations that all have an unforgettable smell. The best of them was Rangoon oil. It's unusual to find a can like that. And this shotgun, which is the Bland sidelock here, may have been in somebody's closet for a long time. I took the sidelock out just so you can see the amount of work that goes into making one of these shotguns, and there isn't any aspect of the firearm that hasn't been thought through and tested over hundreds of years, or maybe not hundreds of years, but a long time. And I think the sidelock was perfected by a gentleman named Frederick Beasley, and then further perfected by Holland and Purdy, as those gun makers found what was best. This is the boxlock design, and you can see, I'll turn the actions over, that the boxlock is a much more compact mechanism. Sidelock's quite a bit longer. There are advantages to the length, and as you can see from the lock over here, it's quite a bit like clockmaking. And I could go over 5-pin side locks, 7-pin side locks, and Holland and Holland removable side locks. This screw retains the side lock. Holland and Holland usually has a lever here. These are fairly modest examples of British shotguns, the side-by-sides. They also made over and unders, and over and unders are actually quite interesting to study on their own. So yeah, you have the side lock and you have the box lock. Some people, obviously the side lock is more difficult to make. The inletting here is remarkable, and you can see how the union of wood to steel is hard to detect, and this isn't necessarily the most perfect one out there. It used to have color case hardening on here, and people like side locks because there's a lot of room here for engraving. As you know, a lot of firearms become kind of works of art. Even today, a lot of manufacturers just roll stamp some engraving on the gun, which is kind of a recollection of the way things were done long ago. And the box lock has some some simple engraving pattern as well. The stocks on the sidelock are, as you can see, well figured walnut, and on this Webley and Scott, not so much figure, but again, completely serviceable. There are no cracks that I could find anywhere. It's always a good idea, if you're stock making, to relieve the wood slightly at this point, or the equivalent point on whatever you're making, so that you don't actually have a wedging effect of the action, but that's another subject. Anyway, remarkable guns, and there's nothing about them that isn't perfected. And I think this is why people go to London and go to these amazing showrooms and drop whatever it is, £20,000 or what have you. And then they have something that lasts for generations and generations, and it doesn't seem that anything prevents these companies from continuing in their trade, not wars, not economic collapses. In fact, if you walk in to Holland and Holland or Rigby's or any of them, you feel like you're walking backwards in time. I remember once I walked in and there were a couple of customers, and the prices of things aren't always evident when you're first looking at them. And one guy, he was from Vermont or something, not that that matters, but anyway, he said, "What are you getting here for £100? And another customer answered, "This guy wants a cup of coffee," which was pretty funny, or it seemed funny to me at the time. Anyway, cleaning rod. I brought out these books because if you can find them on the web someplace, they're a good investment, and they cover all the different gun makers of the UK. And then just in an overall sense, I think if you start buying and collecting British firearms, of course you have to invest a little more money, but it's very interesting from a historical perspective. Sometimes I used to write the gun makers, and they actually had the ledgers if they weren't destroyed by bombing, and I was surprised how many times the ledger would come back with a letter from the firm saying that the shotgun had been ordered by some gentleman and located and delivered to India, and then from India ended up wherever, and then I ended up owning it. And I mean, this case looks a little tattered, but it's leather and it's handmade and everything is fitted. And getting back to the history of United Kingdom, I think because this is just me and a few other collectors that think this, because it's an island, it was always sheltered from different themes and trends in gun making, and you notice it especially in the engraving and kind of the architecture, the design of the firearms is different. It's not affected by anything from any other part of the world, and the engraving is especially most of the time understated, although recently, I mean, they'll make anything that you want, but historically anyway, they're more modest firearms, and the engraving isn't affected by any other themes. They're uniquely British and excellent. And getting back to London, you can visit places like the White Tower or different armories, and of course the gun shops. Quite fascinating. And we know England and the United Kingdom for things like the Magna Carta, and yet at the same time in the White Tower are some not so nice things, instruments of torture and what have you, which I guess reaffirms that the path to some kind of greatness still has a lot of false steps. One thing I'll point out to you, that you go and buy a high-end gun and that's how they finish the buttstock. That's quite common. I asked about that, and the gentleman at the counter said that's because a lot of customers use slip-on leather pads. Obviously there's nothing that they haven't thought of. These have twin triggers, but you could get single triggers or whatever you wanted. A lot of discussion about which is simpler or better. The box lock is simpler, and they call it a box lock simply because the components of the action and the hammers are all captive within this box frame. So if you've watched my other videos, you know that I like simplicity and an economy of parts. There's less to go wrong, in which case the box lock would have the advantage. In terms of grace and some of the angles for sears, triggers, and so on, the side lock does have an advantage, although it's much more difficult to make, and consequently they're worth more used and new. It's really a toss of the coin, and if you're spending a lot of money on a shotgun, I guess maybe the side lock is the way to go, but totally an individual thing. So I think that probably covers it. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of things, but as always, just send your questions if you have any. But remarkable firearms from a remarkable people and at one time empire. These are probably, well, for sure, the top of the heap, so to speak. In fact, if you go to Hamburg, you can visit a company started by two gentlemen, Hartman and Weiss, and they make superb guns. You can look it up on the web. What's interesting to me is you go all that way to Germany, and they're basically making best quality English firearms, except they're making them in Germany. Anyway, I think that's significant praise for British gun makers, and I hope that they continue as they seem to do, and more people appreciate them. It's easy to have, 3 or 4 guns as opposed to more, and that they'll serve you and your kids and your grandkids and so on. So I hope I didn't talk too much. Obviously I like these firearms, and we'll look at some more another time. And that's about it. Thanks for watching.